Can Spencer Rattler run the Kellen Moore offense? What a question, ladies and gentlemen, today. Great question. New Orleans Football, Mike Triplett, Nick Underhill are the backdrop of today's video. So Spencer Rattler and Derek Carr are in the conversation right now of who's going to be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, barring some free agent signing or a trade or a draft pick, but more than likely be one of those two. So then the next question would be a follow-up, if you will, would be, well, can they run the offense? So let's go ahead and listen to what Mike and Nick have to say. We'll react along the way, as only I can do.
Kellen Moore made some comments last week, kind of a little bit lukewarm. It sounded like on Derek Carr, not a full commitment, at least to him, which raises the question, do you think Spencer Rattler is ready to run this offense in full?
Risky business, all right? I've made this very clear. Let's provide a little context, shall we? So if I was a betting man, I would believe, or I would say, that Kellen Moore is non-committal to Derek Carr because they are still working out the contract. They are still working out this restructure because there's only two options. Restructure him or cut him. That's it. All right? From the Saints' point of view. Now, if a trade comes in, that throws things off, but that involves another entity. As far as the Saints, that's their two options. That's their two lines, right? So I think Kellen probably was non-committal because the restructure hasn't happened, okay? Now, I don't hate the idea of Spencer Rattler as a starting quarterback in the New Orleans Saints. Going into the season with just Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener is kind of scary because then you talk about no backup. You talk about no other option. Now, if you told me we went into the season with Spencer Rattler and Jimmy Garoppolo, it's like, well, okay. I mean, if worst case scenario and Garoppolo plays, that's probably about okay. Like you could probably exist in that world. Garoppolo certainly is not going to all of a sudden turn the season around, but he's good enough to kind of get you where you need to be. He could probably be an Andy Dalton type situation where it's like, there's really no big aspirations here, but he's keeping things afloat until we figure something out. Okay. So there's some work to be done before I'm fully comfortable in entering the season with Spencer Rattler as a starting quarterback. Now, can he run the offense? Remember, first thing to remember, the 0-7 or the 0-6, the last year, throw it out. You got coaching changes, you got injuries, you got Rattler's a rookie, he's playing with a different cast of characters every single week. A lot is happening, okay? Throw the record out, throw all that stuff out. Rattler probably can run Kellen's offense because you have to think about what the NFL is like now. What does the NFL want to do now? This isn't 5 years ago where your quarterback had to win you the game or where you had to drop back and throw it 70 times and your quarterback had to throw for 400 yards and 50 touchdowns. In today's day and age, it's the defense is giving you short passes. So can your quarterback be efficient? Can your quarterback read and react? Can your running game help out your quarterback? You almost don't want your quarterback to do too much. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Rattler could run this offense or if Rattler could be efficient in this offense, which we don't even know what the offense looks like. But physically, I think he could do it. For the Saints to achieve anything that matters, like a divisional title or 10 wins or 9 wins or whatever, he would have to take a huge step forward. Do I think that Kellen Moore could help him get to that next step? Yeah, sure. But it is super risky to, at this point, turn everything over to Spencer Rattler without a security blanket.
I wouldn't mind seeing it. I mean, Spencer Rattler went 0-6 last year. That's kind of a misnomer of a number. Actually, his best performance was the game Jake Haener started, and he came in at halftime and almost beat the Commanders, who
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Those are the misnomer things I'm talking about where without any context, all that is a loss, right? But then you add the context that Rattler came in. You add the context that the Commanders made it to the NFC title game. Like you had a lot of context. You had the context of the actual game where it comes down to the last play. Like all that stuff, So don't get bogged down in the record or some of that.
Who went to the NFC Championship game. The thing I liked about Rattler was it didn't seem too big for him.
True.
He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't look
True.
a step slow. It didn't seem too fast for him. He seemed comfortable, but
Well,
he's
that's
got
true.
limitations. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe he shouldn't have been a 5th-round pick. Maybe he should have been a 3rd-round pick. Maybe he should have been a 2nd-round pick. I made Will Levis comparisons, but even if he was Will Levis and he was picked 40th overall or whatever Will Levis was picked, there's going to be highs and lows. There's going to be bumps in the road. He's got a height disadvantage.
I think, too, something that sticks out in people's minds is the idea of Rattler or any player being a certain draft pick. For example, how much more confident would you be? Like, pretend you are the GM or the owner of an NFL team. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident would you be moving forward with Bo Nix? You know, there's no right or wrong answer. Just think to yourself. All right, now how comfortable would you be moving forward as a franchise with Spencer Rattler? Your initial reaction might be, well, much less sure, because Bo Nix is a first-round pick. Bo Nix is a franchise quarterback. Bo Nix is this, and this, right? But I don't think there's that much difference physically or talent-wise between Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler. So if Spencer Rattler was a first-round pick, I think people would be much more likely to say, yeah, it's his. He's the franchise guy. Let him go with it. Let him run with it. But because of that 5th-round designation, which, like Mike said, maybe wasn't totally fair, because of that 5th-round designation, I think people are very concerned with the idea of him truly being the franchise guy. So what I like to do is remove those designations and run it strictly on talent. Mike just said, Will Levis. Will Levis sucks ass. Will Levis is no better than Spencer Rattler, but he was drafted much higher, so he has much more leash. He has much more grace given, right? It's like, let's really try this thing out with Will Levis. Let's really see what we have here. We know what he is. He is absolutely horrible, okay? So some people get lost in that. Some people get lost in where people are drafted and the actual designation, but does it really matter? I would say no.
He's not a perfect quarterback, but I saw enough that I'm not scared to throw him out there and give him a year. I think he'd be better than Desmond Ridder or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah.
I'd like to see it if that's the route they go. If they decide to
Ridder's a good example. We're like Ridder is viewed by some as like a better option because he was drafted higher, even though I think we all know that he's not very good. So I would much rather have Rattler than Ridder. I would rather have Rattler than Daniel Jones.
Save money. I think you can give Spencer Rattler a real look in this offense with a really smart offensive mind who's building the offense around him and maybe be competitive. I wouldn't rule out being competitive with him.
Now, another part of the Sudoku puzzle is that you can't really do a competition. Like, let's say you bring back Derek Carr. You restructure Carr, bring him back. It's not a true competition between him and Rattler. Like, you're playing Derek Carr if you bring him back. Rattler can kind of compete, but he's the backup. All right. So then does that delay Rattler so much that you're thinking, well, after Carr, we'll draft somebody or whatever? Like, does Rattler get lost in that shuffle? Now let's say you offload Derek Carr. Rattler's your guy. You're not going to offload Derek Carr, sign Cooper Rush, and then really think that Cooper Rush could be your starting quarterback. So I wish there could be a true competition for this. Like, I wish it was a different situation, and I wish Rattler could be pushed, like a flip side version of Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask, where it was like, okay, this is a competition, and Baker took it and ran with it and let it rip. But in this situation, Kyle Trask would win the competition and let it rip. You'd have like the journeyman come and compete, but we don't have that. Because of Derek Carr, you can't even get the journeyman to then compete. It's one way or the other, and you can't compete with Derek Carr. So you kind of have to make this decision one way or the other and just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy that needs to learn how to show up the way he says he's going to show up. You know what I mean? Like he kind of will be there and then disappear a little bit, and he needs to be
one half in every game.
Yeah. He'll promise, and it doesn't come through the way it's supposed to come through. But if he could show up the way he's supposed to show up consistently, I think he has a real chance of being who he could be and who he's supposed to be. And the talent's obviously there. Like if you watch it, there's a million things to be excited about. Like the throws, the confidence, the ability to handle pressure.
I mean, he made a couple throws even in blowouts. Like he made a couple throws in blowout games where you see the throws and you're like, oh my God. Like that is high level, elite level arm talent, elite level throw. There are some throws he made with defenders in his chest where it's all arm. He has nothing to step into and the ball is just perfectly placed deep down the field. But like Nick said, we haven't seen it all come together there. Like if he was a baseball pitcher, he's hitting like 101 on the gun, and he's got an absolutely disgusting changeup. But we have yet to see him have a quality start. We have yet to see him get out of the third inning. And then there's always the hopium of like, okay, well, if he can put it together, this guy could be an all-star. This guy could be a stud. But until you see it, all it is hopium and copium. And we're in a situation where making a decision on hopium and copium is very dangerous. You know, like, yeah, I think Rattler has all the talent in the world, but I have not seen it in a consistent basis. I've seen it in sparks. So do you go into the season and say, I'm willing to gamble, I'm willing to bet on those sparks all coming together to give me a consistent performance? That's a very risky move, because that also means in order to do that, you got to send Derek Carr up the road. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. I mean, this is a highly, highly, highly risky decision.
The scrambling, I think, is a huge thing. And watching Jalen Hurts in the Super Bowl, it's hard not to be like, well, man, like having that trait is something that Spencer has that Carr doesn't have. And that could help a little bit just with some of these breakdowns and everything. And it's definitely something that's a tool in, you know, a lot of good quarterbacks' toolboxes. But it's the inconsistencies of him that are the only thing that's really holding him back. Like if he could take who he is for a half of every game and extrapolate it 4 quarters every single time he takes the field, I mean, you have something there. Like that's a good player. But I could easily see an offensive coach coming in here looking at him and being like, I want to work with that. Like that's young, it's cheap, it's exciting, and I can mold it into what I want it to be without these kind of warts. And I think,
and that's a good point, too, where it's so many intangibles, so much stuff that, like where Rattler has some flaws on the field as far as consistency and all that stuff, he also has the bonus of he's a 5th-round rookie quarterback. So you could, for a team that's cash-strapped and a team that's trying to get younger and cheaper, and he is the youngest and cheapest you can be. So that is hugely positive, hugely. Where you look at him and you're like, okay, if I can just make this something, if I can just turn him into something, you have a 5th-round rookie quarterback that you're building the future with. That is very enticing, for sure. And I talked about the 1st-round designation earlier, but like Kenny Pickett. Like when Kenny Pickett first started playing, compared to Spencer Rattler, you can see there's way more talent with Rattler. But Pickett's a 1st-rounder. All right, so you're much more likely to say, okay, let's see what Pickett's got. But if you watch him play, like Rattler has so much more arm talent than Pickett. It's not even close, not even close, right? So part of me thinks like I'm being too cautious. Honestly, part of me thinks I am doing what I'm saying not to do. Part of me thinks that I'm looking at Rattler and saying like, do you really say, let's rock and roll with a 5th-round quarterback who didn't win a game last year? Like, do you really take that risk? Do you do that when the angel on my shoulder or whatever is sitting there going, well, look at the arm talent. Look at him compared to some of these other rookies or compared to some of the other guys who got chances. Like he's just as good or maybe even better. This is when you do take the risk. You know, there is also a benefit in that risk of the benefit of if it works, like you are set up in such a good situation. Such a good spot. And the risk to not starting him would be you delay him or you handcuff yourself a little bit with Carr, and then you can't fully be new, or you can't fully turn the page because you love Carr, and you got to kind of placate to what Carr can do in the offense because you're paying him, he's there. And then you kind of force yourself into the hole of like, do you chase 10 wins? You do have Carr for a year. Does that put you behind schedule and what you're trying to do? So it's so much bigger than football. It's crazy. It's like it starts off as just QB or QB, but then it's like, okay, contract, okay, window, okay, finances, okay, arm talent, okay, like potential. It's like all this stuff it's a wild situation to really dig into.
I think some of the stuff that hurts Carr, like off the field, hurts him on the field as well. Like just kind of like that protection of reputation and self at times. Like I think sometimes you see it in the red zone. I think sometimes you see it with like the throwaways and some of the decisions that he makes and the fear of throwing a pick. Like as weird as it sounds, I wish Derek Carr would throw more interceptions because like sometimes I feel like it's a little bit too tight and there's just a little bit too much of I don't want to make a mistake here. Like, I don't want to be blamed for this loss. And I think if you just went out there and let it rip, Rattler's still someone that'll go out there and let it rip.
Hell yeah, he will.
You have to do that within certain confines. And I'm sure that, you know, if you're a pro Carr person right now, you're thinking that's an insane statement. If you're anti-Carr, you're thinking it's an insane statement. But, like, I think it's the truth. Like, that there just needs to be a little bit of a loosening up there of sorts. And I think that would make him a better player. Maybe Kellen Moore could bring that out of him. I don't know. But
I'm really this is going to be a polarizing take, but I am just kind of over Derek Carr. I really am. Like, I'm just kind of over this. I'm kind of over the experiment. I'm kind of over the experience. And I'm so indifferent on him as a player, but all of this stuff with the Super Bowl, all of this stuff with just the silence and the total separation from the team, to me, and I'm not in the locker room, so, you know, take it for what it's worth. To me, it would be really weird if all of a sudden it's like Saints going with Derek Carr, and then Derek Carr was just everywhere. Like, he's all of a sudden getting interviewed. He's all of a sudden back in New Orleans. He's all of a sudden talking about how much he loves his teammates and players and all that stuff. I'm not saying he doesn't love his teammates and players, but it's just he has been, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have seen or heard from him in any facet, Twitter, interviews, podcast, anything. I don't think we have seen or heard from him in well over a month. I mean, someone tracked down the last time we saw something to do with Derek Carr, from Derek Carr, not from Darren Carr, not from a rumor, like from him or his team, because I haven't seen it. And in that time frame, the Super Bowl was in New Orleans, Media Week, Radio Row. We get a new head coach. And right now he's the franchise quarterback, and he's not acting like a franchise quarterback. So to me, it's just insane. It would feel weird if he just pops up and all of a sudden he's the franchise quarterback, and we're supposed to be excited about that. And it might be nothing. I might be making a lot out of nothing. But if I could, I would wash my hands of the Carr thing. I think it was all fine. It's just a transition. It's just like a lot happened. You know, a lot happened, and none of it has really benefited Carr. No doubt about it. He gives you a better chance to win than Rattler, like on paper, but there's a lot more that goes into it. And you know, the contracts are part of it. The age is part of it. The off-the-field stuff is part of it. Like, I don't know if Rattler is the long-term answer, and I'm not sitting here saying, like, start Rattler because he'll ball out and he'll be the greatest player ever, and we're going to have the next this, and he's a 10-year quarterback for the Saints. Like, I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm just saying in this little vacuum, I'm just kind of over the Carr thing.
Yeah, I think Spencer Rattler, certainly if it was a decision made, they'll allow him to try to run it. I would be curious to see how it would go. I would be for finding out. I don't know what the result would be, though.
Yeah,
like, I can't I can't endorse anyone, so
if you told me to bet on how Spencer Rattler's career turns out, I'm probably going to short Spencer Rattler. Like history just tells us that. Like,
well, with any quarterback, it's not just a Spencer Rattler thing. But like, if you told me if you asked me that question about any quarterback, young quarterback in the NFL, obviously an older quarterback, you know who they are. But like, if you asked me, how do you think Jaden Daniels' career will play out long term? How many Super Bowls do you think he'd win? I'd say 0 probably. If you said how many MVPs does he win, I'd probably say, I don't know, 0, maybe 1. You know, like, you're always going to short the quarterback. You're always going to short the player because such a small percentage of players do those things. I mean, think about how good Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have been. Neither one of them have a Super Bowl, right? So, and up until a couple weeks ago, Josh Allen didn't even have an MVP. it's very difficult to do the things that people lump onto quarterbacks very quickly. And we see a lot of quarterbacks who have success. Mac Jones, who has success. It's like, okay, we're set. We're good. He's the franchise guy. A year and a half later, he's gone. Not even on the team, right? See you later. Bailey Zappi. He comes in for Mac Jones. Okay, maybe Bailey Zappi's the franchise guy. He's gone. We see it with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, he comes in, does what he does, wins, goes to the Super Bowl, all that stuff. And now San Francisco's in a situation where they don't even know if they want to pay him. They don't even know if they want to move forward with them. So with quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks, it is so up in the air. Trevor Lawrence, all intents and purposes, is horrible. If Trevor Lawrence was a 5th round pick, he would not even be starting in the NFL. But because he's the first overall pick, because he's supposed to be a franchise quarterback, because he's 6 foot whatever and has long hair and all of that, he gets a $300 million contract, and Jacksonville's okay with him being the franchise quarterback. But when you look at Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, you're like, let's say, maybe they're just 2 bad quarterbacks. So quarterback is a very weird role, and forecasting them is hard. Rarely do they ever work out how you think they're going to work out. I mean, even someone like right now, like Caleb Williams. If you told me Caleb Williams would be a 3-time MVP, I'd believe you. If you told me Caleb Williams was not starting in the NFL in 2 seasons, I'd believe you. The volatility at the quarterback position, especially with young quarterbacks, is so high. Super, super, super high. So same with Jaden Daniels. I would believe you if you told me Jaden Daniels won the MVP next year. I'd also believe you if you told me Jaden Daniels had an awful year, took a step backwards, and people were debating how good he was, a la C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud was in the MVP conversation his rookie year. Halfway through his second year, people are saying maybe C.J. Stroud isn't that good. At the end of last year, before the playoffs, I heard reputable people who I respect were having the conversation of, if you could go back, would you take Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud? Now, how fast is that going back and forth? Bryce Young was about to be out of the NFL. C.J. Stroud was an MVP candidate. Less than a year later, in the same year, first couple weeks of the season, by week 4 when Bryce Young got benched, the thought was we will never see him play quarterback in meaningful games again. And the thought was C.J. Stroud could take the Texans to the Super Bowl. By the time the season was ending, a couple weeks later, people were saying, maybe I would go back and draft Bryce Young over C.J. Stroud. The volatility is there. And so Spencer Rattler right now, unfortunately, the Saints are having to make a decision with nothing but that volatility as context.
There's a few Russell Wilsons and Dak Prescotts out there, but for the most part, even first round picks, but definitely, Kenny Pickett, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson. I mean, there's so many young guys who have some talent, and it just never happened. I keep bringing up Will Levis as a recent example, like Desmond Ridder, who is Malik Willis.
I think he's got more upside than Levis. So.
Maybe, but I'm saying, like, if I'm going to look at it analytically, I'm going to bet against him. Like you got to be a top 5 pick to have even higher than a 50% chance of panning out.
But that's not even true. Like I just said with Trevor Lawrence. If you, how long do you hold on to that top 5 designation? I mean, Zach Wilson was second overall pick. So even like Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, like how long do you hold on to? Well, he was in the top 5. He's a top 5 guy. So he's got something. He's got a chance. He's got talent, whatever. When in reality, once they start playing, once their career begins, you kind of got to throw that away and just judge them on who they are. Judge them for what they are doing. Judge them for what they actually have done on the field. It's crazy. I mean, it is. You would think at this point they'd be better at forecasting or prognosticating for quarterbacks, but we're just not there yet.
But I am not holding last year against him. I mean, he got thrown into the fire as a rookie.
I think all things considered last year, I think is a positive for Rattler. And a lot of people look at the record and all that stuff, they say he was terrible. But I think given the situation, the injuries, him playing way before he was prepared, the coaching turmoil. I think new offense with Coop, like all that stuff. Like I think overall you would give him a decent grade, not an A+, but you wouldn't give him an F. And one more thing on Dak Prescott. Dak's a good example. You find a diamond in the rough in Dak. Dak has been good in his career, but he's got relatively nothing to show for it. Right? No MVPs, no playoff success, certainly no Super Bowls, but he's been good. It's like even the quarterbacks who are that diamond in the rough, and they are good, and they are a franchise guy, even then, it's like there's still stuff to be desired.
Mid-season as an injury replacement, then he got taken out of the lineup, then he got put back in the lineup. He was playing behind just an injury-tormented offensive line, like
no
barely an
playmakers.
offensive line at all. A lot of times he didn't have his receivers available, and it wasn't a very good team in general, and the defense wasn't playing well when he was
available.
It's just like
defense
in no way am I like, well, my mind's made up on Spencer Rattler now because we saw it last year. No, there is a much fuller determination to be made. I also don't know if he'll ever get there, but I know that we don't know yet. And I'm excited by a lot of the things I'd like to watch someone try to develop him and find out. Yeah. Somebody asked us in the last show, should the Saints draft Jackson Dart? Let's say the Saints drafted Jackson Dart at 9. I think Spencer Rattler could work out just as well or not as well as Jackson Dart.
Yeah.
I don't
exactly. And that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like Dart just represents like drafting a quarterback high, and it feels better as a fan. I think fans feel good about Spencer Rattler has just as much chance to succeed as Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. I don't think there's that much difference separating them talent-wise. We don't have a quarterback that is just an absolute unicorn in this draft class. I was telling somebody the other day, a respected former NFL draft or NFL scout. I'm pretty sure he was with the Bills. He does his own thing now, and he does his own draft grades and all that stuff. Very similar to Todd McShay's big board and all that. He gave Shedeur Sanders an undrafted free agent grade, and that's a NFL level scout. Okay, undrafted free agent grade. But if Shedeur goes 6th or 4th or 3rd or 9th, people are going to believe we've got the franchise guy because it represents first round top 10 quarterback. But really, talent-wise, arm-wise, all that stuff, not that different than Spencer Rattler. So it's a weird lens to view things through, very ever-changing lens, and kind of like what Mike said, I would love to find out. I would love to see if Rattler can be developed or what that looks like, but the Saints don't really have the luxury of finding out. You almost have to make a decision before finding out. You have to make a decision unless there's some restructure with Carr where it allows you to keep him this year with the notion that you're going to offload him after this year, if that's kind of the agreed upon thing, and then you save yourself okay, we're going to see what we have with Rattler as the backup while we play out this year of Carr, and then move off of Carr and go with Rattler. Unless that ends up being the thing, and you can kind of hedge your bets, you can kind of meet yourself in the middle. But as of right now, that's not an option because we haven't seen the restructure.
I would look at it the same way. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. And for that reason, I almost I would want the Saints to draft a sure thing at quarterback. Tank for Arch, bring in Doug Nussmeier, then tank for his son or whatever next year.
Ain't no tanking for Garrett Nussmeier. What are you going to tank to get a 4th round pick? I can't believe how. I understand Nussmeier plays at LSU, whatever. I understand Arch is from New Orleans, but I cannot believe how much I've heard tank for Arch and tank for Garrett Nussmeier when Arch wasn't even starting on his college team. And Quinn Ewers, Quinn Ewers is what, a 6th round pick right now? Arch is so far away from a sure thing. Arch could not be further away from a sure thing. Let's see him actually start at Texas for an extended period of time before we say let's tank for him. Garrett Nussmeier, same thing. Like, how good is Garrett Nussmeier? I would say kind of average. If I had to throw it right now, a grade out there on Nussmeier, I would say he's kind of whatever. Arch does some cool things, but overall, kind of whatever.
Have a top 5 pick, trade up in the draft, whatever it takes or whatever. But I don't know that I need to trade in Spencer Rattler for the 4th best quarterback in this year's class. I think I'd rather work with Rattler.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he's going to be better than Will Levis. I just think if you put both of them in front of me right now and said take one, I'd probably go Rattler. Like, I think Rattler probably has a higher ceiling than Levis. Levis I feel like I've seen more warts out of him, and it's just probably because he's played in 21 games or whatever. Yeah. And like, I bet
on the Titans a lot.
Did he throw more picks than touchdowns last year? It was like a 50-50 split, something like that. But I feel like Rattler's got, I don't know. Like, I would rather work with him than Levis right now. But Levis might end up having a better career, but it's just unrealized potential right now. It feels like Rattler has a little bit more than
he ended up 13-12
than him right now. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, definitely. I could see it going either way with him, which is going to take us into our next topic.
There you go. Good, great conversation right there. Fantastic debate, fantastic dialogue. It's a tough one. I'm going to say something controversial yet brave, and I'll end on this. If you told me I could have Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, or Spencer Rattler, right now I would take Spencer Rattler. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the comments below what you think. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.